good-looking pan. And any barmaid can be a star maid if she dances with or without a plan. Hooray for Hollywood! When you're terrific, if you're even good. Where anyone at all from Shirley Temple to Amy Semple is equally understood. Go out and try your luck, you may be Donald Duck. Hooray for Hollywood!
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are listening to a Radulich Broadcasting premiere podcast, Damn You Hollywood. And here's your host, the carnival geek himself, Robert Winfree. Yay!
I resent that.
You also are frozen. That's FYI.
Already? God. Hang on.
Well, Robert figures
Let
out
me
his
try
camera
that.
troubles. Tonight, I will
camera.
vamp for you. Tonight, we are talking about
Okay.
Nightmare Alley. This was yet another picture that came over in the Fox deal. It was released under their boutique, the boutique production company, Searchlight. It was originally... it held its world premiere at the Alice Tully Hall in New York on December 1st, 2021. And then it was accompanied by multiple screenings at the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures in LA and the Telluride Film Festival Bell Lightbox in Toronto. The film was theatrically released December 17th after having been rescheduled from its original release date of December 3rd. It was directed by Guillermo del Toro, who we like on this network. And so that's part of the reason why we're doing this tonight. We tend to just follow him and see what he's doing, and he's usually doing interesting things that we can talk about that don't make me and Robert want to, for various reasons and different reasons, bang our heads into the wall. It's based on the book Nightmare Alley by William Lindsay Gresham, and is in many ways a remake of the 1947 film. It stars Bradley Cooper, Cate Blanchett, Toni Collette, Willem Dafoe, Richard Jenkins, Rooney Mara, Ron Perlman, Mary Steenburgen, and David Strathairn. All right, Robert. There you are.
Yeah, that tends to sort itself out when I plug it back in, but it might kick me out on occasion. I don't know why this happens. Frequently, the notification I get is like, "Hey, make sure nothing else has access to your web camera." So I cut access to everything else to the webcam, and then it still freezes on occasion because who knows why.
Hey, listen, it's better than I don't want to spend too long on this. In fact, if I ever went back to edit this, I'd cut this what I'm about to say out, but I'm going to address it anyway. I look back at like our, the years that we were on Blog Talk Radio. And I look at the numbers for some of that stuff, and some of it's okay, and some of it's not great. And it makes me wonder, like, we covered a lot of things that are popular. I wonder why people don't listen. And I've come to the conclusion it's because they've heard other stuff we've released, and the sound was so garbage, they just assume now everything I put up from that era is terrible. And it's not like a terrible discussion, it's just inaudible. I think Robert Cooper said his current girlfriend has tried to listen to some of the old Metal Hammer of Dooms from like 2013, 2014. And they are unlistenable because the audio quality is so bad. So at least we're better off than we were 5 years ago, is my point, even with frozen cameras.
Yeah, that's very true. So you went over the history of the pretty good there, so I'm not going to delve too deep into that. You're correct. Del Toro's a director that I'm happy to see anything his name is attached to. He makes interesting films. They're not always great, but they're at least interesting. He doesn't make generic schlock.
Yeah, Sean and I reviewed Pan's Labyrinth from a few years back,
which is still one of the most. That's an amazing film.
It is an amazing looking film. It's pretty fantastic. Guillermo del Toro, one of the most heartbreaking misses that we've had. One of the things we were not able to get is Guillermo del Toro's take on The Hobbit. He had a completely different vision for what that was supposed to be before he dropped out of the project.
I would love to see what his vision of that was. I would love to slide over to the alternate reality where that got made.
Sure. Where we get Bryan Singer's third X-Men movie and not his Superman movie. There's a whole alternate universe where better decisions could have been made.
There's nothing good about. I shouldn't say nothing. There's very little good about Bryan Singer's work, but that's a different discussion.
It certainly is, Ollie. I'll actually be revisiting those with my son. I told him we have to watch all 10 of the X-Men movies before we see Doctor Strange.
Why do you do this to that poor child?
Because he's 7. He's the perfect age for a Marvel fan.
And you're gonna make him watch X3 and Dark Phoenix?
Yeah. We are father and son, and we enjoy spending time together.
Look, I'm not. This is not me zinging you about wanting to watch movies with your son. It's not even me zinging you about you wanting to introduce your son to X-Men movies. There's a lot of shit there.
there is, and we will wade through it all, and I trust him to come up with his own conclusions. Anyway, back to Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah, so
he's got a Pinocchio movie coming out on Netflix, and I'm like, it was delayed a whole year. I am dying to see that.
I'm really interested in that too.
Mm-hmm.
So the other thing I wish we could get from Del Toro, and we're never gonna get it, and it's a crying shame, but for a long time, and I think he would still do this movie, I think, if offered the opportunity, but he wanted to do an adaptation of At the Mountains of Madness, which is a very famous novella from H.P. Lovecraft.
Okay.
And
it sounds like he would kick that butt. Like it would be amazing.
No one doubts how awesome that would be conceptually. James Cameron was on board, like wanting to produce it for a while, but they actually had Tom Cruise, I think, at one point loosely attached to lead. The problem is, and this is a general problem with a lot of Del Toro movies, he does a lot of practical stuff. And that can do things to the budget. He wanted a budget for this thing of north of $100 million. It was might have been right around 2. And you're just really gonna struggle to sell to studio executives a $200 million R-rated horror movie, even with Tom Cruise in the lead, being directed by Guillermo del Toro. That's just a hard sell.
Okay, so from the beginning of the talkies till 2019, you are 110% correct. Post 2019, in the era of streaming and COVID, I actually think it's an easier sell now. I'm wondering if someone will revisit this idea, and including giving him the budget, because think about this. You know, HBO Max gives him $100 million budget and says, we're going to run this as a limited theatrical thing so that it can be it can win awards, but this is basically going to be an HBO Max exclusive post limited run, and people subscribe. This would draw people, I think, to that streaming service. I think this is one of those things where, like, if you can only find it on HBO Max, people would look for it.
I think Amazon might be willing to foot a lot of that. Like,
sure.
You could easily do that. Like, it's not that there's not options, but
right.
He tried to get that going at a time when that was a really hard sell. And I think it's, to be clear, you're right that it's easier now, but I still think it's a hard sell, especially with how many large-scale, sure-thing releases this year we've seen fall flat on their face for a variety of reasons.
Just want to remind you that Red Notice got made and greenlit for sequels.
It did. And Netflix is weird like that, don't get me wrong. But again, well, look, the sell on Netflix is watch The Rock and Gal Gadot and what's his face?
Ryan Reynolds.
Like, hey, 3 of the more bankable, visible stars that we have, watch them together.
You're running away from the obvious point, which is that you have a handful of distributors out there now with a seemingly endless array of cash to throw at prestige projects.
Yeah, again, I think it's easier. I think you're correct in that respect. It's still hard. Like, that's not an easy sell.
Well, the transition from that to this is this got made for, and I don't want to skip ahead to the money, but it got made for $60 million. It is made like a small fraction of that. We'll talk about it at length in a little bit.
I do want to.
I mean, like, this is one of those. I'm going to bring this up now, and we'll revisit it when we talk about the money. I have been, and this is more of me thinking out loud, and then we'll come back to it. I have said, both privately to you and to a degree publicly, I wonder how much money Disney has lost on the Fox deal. Now, I understand. I am not saying the Fox deal is some sort of albatross or anchor weighing that company down. It'll be fine. They'll be fine.
It was a short-term loss for a long-term gain.
Well, they went into that had to have been 2018, 2019 when the Fox deal was announced, and then it took a year to get final.
Well, it was older than that, I think, because
Mhm.
Dark Phoenix had to be released after Disney had bought them.
I'm
And
trying to remember what year
I
this
forget
was.
what year that was. Point being, it is still relatively new, all things considered.
Right. So my point is they bought it pre-COVID, and
Yeah.
I'm sure they thought, okay, well, some of these will surely be winners.
And so many of them weren't even before COVID.
Right. Like
Hey!
that's my point. So many of these films that they inherited that were in various stages of production or near to be released, and almost to a letter, none of them have been like profitable. It's like
Dark Phoenix flopped. I mean, New Mutants, you know what? If I were to put on my conspiracy theorist hat and be ridiculous and potentially get us in trouble on YouTube,
good start.
the COVID situation did give them a viable out for why New Mutants was so bad, did so poorly.
Okay.
So,
well, here's what I think you just pointed out without even realizing you were doing it. I'm wondering how much of Disney looked at the Fox movies and were like, by contract we have to release these, so we'll just release them. But we don't care if we take a bath on them. We don't. I mean, and again, transitioning into Nightmare Alley here. Think about this. They had this set for December 3rd. What was December 3rd's big competition? Woof. Okay, Woof, which I reviewed with Whitney Seibold as kind of a joke. So there was nothing. Okay, there was West Side Story and I think one of the football movies, December 10th. It had a good it would have had a good 2-week run before the whole theater marketplace got ate up by Spider-Man.
I don't know.
Changed it and went head to head with their own property. There's no way, and this is my point. To me, this feels like Wall Street. Why are you wrecking this company? Because it's wreckable. Why are you releasing these movies like The Last Duel and Nightmare Alley in places where they're never going to make any money? Because we can, and we'd rather take the loss than try to market these and potentially release them in competitive places and still lose because, oh, by the way, there's also an ongoing pandemic.
Yeah, very, very possible. Yeah, I do want to say about this one, a $60 million budget for this kind of movie is not really out of bounds. I mean, I think it's higher end, but it's not it's not $100+ million for The Last Duel like that.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other. So I mentioned that to a coworker of mine today. Like, if your choices are in the same grouping, you can only see one movie a month, and in the same month you've got Venom, Halloween, Dune, and in a movie about a rape. Which one are you going to see? And he's like, Halloween, because he's a big horror nut.
There is no one who answers The Last Duel in that scenario.
That's my point. And he was like, what's The Last Duel? So kind of wrapping this whole thing up, if you're releasing this in September, around the time of like Malignant and Cry Macho, you've got a fighting chance of making $120 million on it. And you're releasing you're releasing it the same day as Spider-Man Avengers Endgame. You're an insane person.
Spider-Man Into the Eternal Spider-Verse Infinity.
So what happens in this thing, man?
Well, Nightmare Alley primarily follows Bradley Cooper's character of Stanton Carlisle, goes by Stan. We are introduced to him burning a body in a farmhouse.
Like you do.
I mean, who hasn't? After which he boards a bus and wanders around for a little bit. We're set in the early 1940s here.
Mm-hmm.
He he winds up at a carnival, just at one of the bus stops, where he picks up some work as hired as a labor, like taking down tents and whatnot at first. And just through kind of happenstance, he sticks around. He becomes part of the carnival. He does some barking and selling for one of the psychic acts. He does any kind of manual labor that needs. He helps out with the guy who runs the freak show.
He essentially becomes a producer.
Pretty much. And then like every producer whose deep-seated goal it is to be successful on camera, you hacks. He he and this is a fairly stationary. This is a stationary carnival, not a traveling one. At this point, the traveling one hooks up with a stable location carnival, and the psychic act and her husband, who's the magician, they kind of take a liking to him, and he starts learning some of the tricks of their trade, specifically reading mentalism, stuff like that, rather than a lot of the more traditional magic acts. As he's there, this bothered me just a little bit in the movie, and for one reason only. As soon as this scene happened, I knew exactly. I had not read the book this is based on. I have not seen the original movie, but you don't put this particular Chekhov's gun on the table if you're not going to fire it.
Mm-hmm.
When the carnival geek, who is a person who bites the heads off of live chickens, Cooper watches this Stanton. He watches this his first day in the carnival, when he's just there as a paying customer, basically. And he's a little bit fascinated by this. So after the geek falls ill, because he is poorly kept, not maintained, like they keep him in a cage, he's unstable. And
you think mental health care is poor now?
Really? He and Willem Dafoe take him to a clinic and leave him on the doorstep like so many unwanted children. And they're getting dinner or something after the fact, and Bradley Cooper asks him, "So, where do you find carnival geeks?" And he tells him, "You don't find them, you have to make them. These are not naturally occurring phenomena, despite what every salesman of this kind of like him will tell you."
Mm-hmm.
So he runs through the process. You find someone really down on their luck. Some veteran of the First World War suffering from PTSD, some alcoholic.
Somebody with schizophrenia.
Someone who, again, whether they already have some kind of mental health issue or not, you find someone who is really, really down on their luck, and you offer them a job temporarily. We'll find a real geek eventually, but until we do, it's a gag. We'll give you a razor blade to help you do it so you don't have to actually bite it. And you kind of lure him in with this, and you give him booze laced with opium. And you keep this up for a bit until a certain point when you tell him, "We no longer need your services." And then the last night out, you really dry out the show, and you let this poor sap, whose mind is already fractured, and if it wasn't before, it certainly is now with the opium addiction, you let him think about what's going to happen if you kick him out of this job. And all the pain and suffering that goes into detoxing like that, especially back then. I mean,
Yeah.
it's no picnic now, even, much less.
I think I've said this before. The three things that we will treat for detox of the array of drugs out there are opiate detox, benzodiazepine detox, and alcohol detox, because those three will kill you.
Yeah.
You know what won't kill you? Meth detox, cocaine detox, and
they're
various other drugs.
But they're very, very messy.
Yes, they are.
Anyway, you make him think about this, and in order to stave off this horror, this broken person will then literally bite the head off a chicken.
All right.
And at that point, they're gone. So
Yeah.
you can keep them, you keep, doping them, and their brain fractures, their psyche goes away, their personality collapses, and you get to use them in this way as long as you see fit. And if any of the cops ask questions, you do a good job of hiding it.
Sure.
Because, we are morally bankrupt people. As soon as this scene happens, you know where this story's going. If you have any degree of foresight whatsoever. And that doesn't make it uninteresting. Let me be clear about that. It just, because the journey is interesting in and of itself in this movie, and that deserves a lot of credit. But it does remove some of the mystery about the ending. And that's a minor quibble on my part. Because, everything that goes into film is there for a purpose. Unless you're a hack like J.J. Abrams or Michael Bay or a few others who just throw crap on screen and see what happens. But yell about them later.
We'll talk about it tomorrow.
I haven't seen that movie. I'm seeing it tomorrow. So
okay,
I will trust your assessment. So he is told about this process, and it's horrifying, but Bradley Cooper is a bit of a sociopath himself. So, well, his character, not him. I don't know him as a person. So he takes up kind of the task of mentalism. He likes learning this, figures out the legitimate side of it, which is reading people, profiling them, making educated guesses, and the pure con artistry that goes into how you manipulate the information you're able to gain, working verbal cues and tricks with a partner to describe images you can't see based on what they tell you, stuff along that line. He kind of falls for Rooney Mara's character of Molly, who's she has part of an act where she just gets shocked, basically. To kind of be shocking, pardon the pun. They're accosted by some cops who want to run them out of town, but a nice little bit of faux psychic readings from Bradley Cooper convinces the sheriff in question that they shouldn't really be messed with. He eventually convinces, the long and the short of this is he accidentally, and I'm going to put that in air quotes because they never say whether it's deliberate on his part or not, but given some of his issues, it might be.
Mm-hmm.
The character, the magician who he's learning from, is an alcoholic. And he asks him to bring him booze on occasion, and Willem Dafoe has 2 cases of alcohol in differently painted wooden crates. One of them is wood alcohol, which do not consume. The other is sugarcane alcohol, which is perfectly safe. They're in different colored boxes, but when he goes to get them, it's dark and he's a little bit distracted by Willem Dafoe's character. I think he's breaking in a new geek or something to that effect. There's something else going on that he is passingly interested in and might have just been distracted. So the magician's poisoned. Again, terrible tragedy or act of unbelievable maliciousness. That one's left up to you. There's a lot of other stuff he does that is unambiguous. He convinces Molly to leave this particular carnival with him with the promises that they can take this act and they can make it bigger in a fancy venue. And they do. They move to Chicago. He is a featured performer at one of the fancier hotels there. And things are going okay, but Molly's not quite as keen on the uptake for everything that's going on here. He's a little bit disillusioned by this. And things change for him when he is introduced to 2 characters. One of them is a judge who's struggling with the death of who's still struggling with the death of his son from the First World War, and it's straining his marriage with his wife. The other is the psychiatrist played by Cate Blanchett, who is on to his game, and he's still able to kind of she kind of tries to sandbag one of his performances to see if he's legit or not at the judge's behest, because the judge wants to have some kind of psychic reading, a seance where he talks to his son and whatnot, and that's not something Bradley Cooper's character has done to this point. He sticks to the basics of mentalism, reading people surface levels, describing objects, doing things that are impressive if you don't know the tricks, and frankly are a little bit more impressive even if you do know, if you're someone like me. The intricacies of how you get to do that's really cool, actually. But he's been warned off of doing, they call them spook shows, which are these seances, I can speak to your dead relative, I can convey messages for them, all for a reasonable fee, of course. And it's good advice not to be a phony psychic like that, because that's dangerous on a bunch of levels and is utterly, utterly contemptible on a moral level. And there's certain people who did it on television and still do it on television, and I have nothing but contempt for those individuals. And so he decides to do this for the judge because it's a lot of money. He goes to talk with Cate Blanchett because the judge was a client of hers, and he uses his kind of association with her, offering her a cut of the money to gain information he would not otherwise have access to. They have a little bit of back and forth. Save that for after the fact. He does the reading for the judge and the judge's wife, and it seems to repair a little bit of what's going on between them. The wife did not want their son to enlist. And hopefully I don't get kicked out again as I double check my camera here. Yes. Okay. All right. Reconnect. There we go. So the wife didn't want the son to enlist. The father was in support of it, and he died horribly in no man's land. So he seems to repair a little bit of that relationship. The judge then, and this is where things get really icky, theoretically the judge actually, but we'll get to that, recommends him to an extraordinarily wealthy and powerful businessman whose name escapes me as far as the character goes. Give me a second, I'll find that.
No, you keep going. I will do that.
Grindle, Ezra Grindle, and just
Played by Richard Jenkins.
Yeah. And Grindle offers a lot of money if he's able to kind of reconnect with a woman he was in love with that died. And Cooper, despite being warned repeatedly that Grindle is unstable, violent, and exceptionally dangerous, decides, well, that just eases my conscience a little bit about milking him of cash. He starts going through these seances. He does research. He steals some case files from Cate Blanchett, who treated Grindle briefly. Tries to manipulate the guy out of money. And there's details here we can go into later if we're so inclined. This winds up going badly because Grindle wants to see a manifestation of, like, make her ghost appear. Bradley Cooper comes up with an idea for how he might pull this off with the help of Molly, who's become increasingly aware that Bradley Cooper is not in love with her anymore, and she wants to get out of this relationship. She agrees to, for one final time, help him. She dresses up, but the meeting between them goes awry. He realizes he's being scammed. Cooper then beats him to death with his bare hands. His bodyguard chases them down. Bradley Cooper runs him over with a car twice. If you're going to do it, you got to do it right. Molly then leaves, knowing this guy is too far gone. He goes to talk with Cate Blanchett to get all the money that he's been storing in her safe because he didn't want Molly to know all the things he was doing. Only to find that she has been scamming him and using him to gain revenge on Grindle for some pretty awful things Grindle did to her. Grindle, by the way, confesses to being a serial abuser, if not killer, of women. And again, completely and utterly putting Bradley Cooper in a bit of a moral right to just give that man a horrible death. And I don't say that ironically either. Like, that, you're going to kill somebody in this world, you know. There are worse people to kill.
Yeah, like this is the Last Night in Soho discussion again.
Different discussion. This is a much better movie. So he is left with essentially very little of the money. She'd replaced most of the bills and gangster roles that he had given her with singles. She calls the police. She starts to frame him as a deranged person who just assaulted her and violently murdered people.
Let me say this. If you're looking for, I don't particularly love the phrase gaslighting, especially how it's used now. It seems to be one of the straw man arguments for any time somebody is confronted about anything, right or wrongly. They're like, you're gaslighting me. But if you'd like a textbook definition of gaslighting, if you'd like to see what that looks like, that scene where she's basically like, you're an insane person and this has all been a delusion and you're regressing from your previously healed state, and he's like,
you and I have never met outside this room. Like,
right.
She's saying this for the recording that she's turned on. She's recording what's going on. But it's also a wonderful bit of manipulation on her part. We can get to the minutia in a second.
I was gonna say that scene is obviously very well acted. The whole thing's well acted, but that scene is exceptionally well acted on Cate Blanchett's part. And if you ever want to show, if you're ever in an argument with somebody and the person says, because they don't want to be confronted, you're gaslighting me, be like, listen, I'm going to need you to watch this scene because because that's what that looks like, not what I'm currently doing to you. Yeah,
that's true. So he goes on the run from the police, now broke financially and bereft of friends, family, or otherwise. We get a flashback. He does bits of therapy with Cate Blanchett where we reveal that he murdered his father before burning him and his farmhouse down and then heading out. So he's always been a dark person, but he escapes the police. He jumps into a boxcar. He becomes a hobo for many years, and
Living
then
that hobo life, stabbing folks with this hobo knife.
sure, I appreciate that reference.
I'm sure you do.
Telling tall tales for sponge baths like you do. He winds up seeing a carnival flyer, an older one that references the psychic that he learned from. So he inspired to try and one last ditch effort to try and pick up what's right with his life, to make things right. He goes to a local carnival, and to the guy who runs it says, I was a mentalist. I know I look like crap. I'm really down on my luck, but I've got a good act. I'd like to demonstrate it for you. And the other guy says, no, I don't like mentalism to begin with. And then before he heads out, he offers him a drink. He then essentially does the sales pitch that Willem Dafoe mentioned earlier about turning this poor man into a carnival geek. And Bradley Cooper's character remembers that conversation. Then makes the conscious choice that there's nothing going on good for me. I've lost everything. I was screwed up to begin with. And when asked, you think you could be temporarily our geek, just until we find a real one. He just says, Mister, I was born for this, which is a reference to the original movie where that was kind of the catchphrase of the same character. He doesn't use it all anywhere else in this film, but it's a nice little callback. And then laughs and sobs hysterically as we cut to credits.
This is it's not a colorful movie. So when I say the following, I don't want to mislead people, but it's a very pretty movie. The cinematography in this is pretty gorgeous. Obviously, Guillermo del Toro is going for a noir aesthetic. I think he accomplishes that in spades. It's a strong cast. It's very wonderfully well acted.
Not a bad performance to be found here anywhere.
Cate Blanchett is sharp as a knife in this. She's really, really good. Bradley Cooper. I think because people who know that he's the voice of Rocket, sometimes don't give him enough credit or credit's due. But Bradley Cooper is an exceptional actor.
These are people, mostly silly Marvel fans, who have never bothered to look up what that man is capable of doing in better films. For example, look, the two big ones are obviously Silver Linings Playbook and A Star Is Born.
Well, I was going to say, let's not pick too much on the Marvel fans. Remember, he was also in the Hangover movies. So
true.
Most Earthlings have only seen him in Guardians of the Galaxy or the Hangover movies.
Yeah, that's fair. Although I tend to think even lower of fans of the Hangover franchise than I do fans of Marvel.
No argument there, but my point is that you don't know how good Bradley Cooper is if you've only seen him in those movies. So he's exceptional in this. Sometimes an entire movie is
he goes
one actor, but this one he's a giant, but he's a giant among other giants, down to Ron Perlman.
He's the central pillar.
Yeah,
but he is not the only thing supporting this film.
So I said the cinematography is really, really well. It's a very interestingly shot movie. My criticisms are thusly, and it's not a criticism of the movie. Thinking back to some of the other things that we've talked about, I'm always the one arguing, don't judge a movie by your expectations, judge it by the presentation. So this is me kind of just reaching for something to talk about. You called your movie Nightmare Alley, and yes, I understand it's an adaptation of a book. It is also a remake of a movie. I am not trying to say it should have been anything. I'm just saying
there should have been an alley.
There should have been a nightmare. Other than the Carnival Geek stuff, I thought when I pitched this movie for you as a review, I was like, hey, Guillermo del Toro, noir, horror, Nightmare Alley. This sounds like something that would interest you, and it did. But I think I was thinking more of this would be leaning on the traditional horror side. I thought there would be some graphic imagery that would be unsettling. There isn't.
No, what's unsettling about this story is the material covered, not anything overly.
It's described as a
Probably it's what, like a
Neo-
neo-noir psychological thriller is kind of how
right
they
down
have
to the
it.
letter, bud. You nailed it. Ding.
I don't agree. I don't necessarily. I mean, like when we talk about categorization, like
Mhm.
it clearly does in some respects fall into those genres. I don't
Sure.
mean to imply that it doesn't, but that's not really what I think of this movie as.
Okay. See, I'm in agreement with this neo-noir psychological thriller, but what I was getting to was I thought we were getting more of a traditional graphic horror movie. I thought they would be playing around with some imagery. The horror as it is in the subtext. It's in the
Yeah.
conditions the actors suffer. It's in the, the falling apart of people's lives, and and how horrible this all is. And when you think about, it was a very nice recitation of everything that was said, but if you boil it down to its brass tacks, this guy takes advantage of a mourning father.
Yep.
Like, that's all horrifying. And so,
Mhm.
horror can be many things, as we've discussed on a number of occasions. But when you think of horror, you think of Jason running around with a machete, chopping up people, or Michael Myers running around with the kitchen knife and whatnot. But horror can be that. I think I've mentioned this before. Like, I read a short story about the Joker, and the Joker switches bodies essentially with the Doctor, and and so now the Doctor is wearing the Joker's face, and the Joker is able to walk out of Arkham Asylum. And the Doctor realizes what's happened, and what horror is now befalling him. But by the way, the last thing the Joker says is, "I'll go ahead and give your wife my best." Like, oh, yikes! That's horrifying. That's
It really
horror.
is.
It's not brains falling out on the floor, which I will get to next. But it is. I would tell you that I'm more horrified by the possibility of a guy wearing my face banging my wife than I am at the at a guy being stabbed to death multiple times like a Thanksgiving turkey. See our review of Halloween Kills. I will tell you on the occasion that Guillermo del Toro does have to film something graphic and create something kind of gross looking. Well achieved. It just doesn't happen all that often. I'm referring specifically to when he runs over the bodyguard.
That's a pretty bad one. The fact that Bradley Cooper literally punches the nose off of Ezra's face.
Yeah.
This is I mentioned this about Del Toro when we reviewed Crimson Peak, and it's true of pretty much everything he does, especially nowadays. He doesn't really lean on graphic violence. But anytime it is appropriately called for in a story, he never shies away from it. Like,
yeah.
Crimson Peak has one kind of shocking moment of violence early, then a lot of nothing until our finale.
Yeah.
This one has, maybe two? Like, his escape from that compound is kind of it. Again, he beats a man to death and then runs over another one. The guy biting the head off the chicken is, to certain degrees, a little bit in that vein, but that's more about the human than the on-screen violence.
So yeah, so this was not what I expected. So that's my one little criticism there. It's probably about a half an hour too long.
I think that's my biggest gripe with this. I would have to go through this movie with a fine-tooth comb to figure out what to cut and where, but it does feel a bit long. And
Guillermo del Toro feels, is definitely shooting this in a I'm in love with the scene kind of fashion. Those directors who it's almost like perverted how long they linger on a scene.
Yeah, we've talked about Chloe Zhao's films.
And that's what I think. Like, sometimes you have to kill your baby. Sometimes you need an editor. The Patton Oswalt thing of you got to kick the director out of the room, and then and have it sit then cut something that is coherent and makes sense. And while I respect an auteur's decision to linger and present film as art, sometimes you just need to get to the point. And this movie doesn't do that well enough.
Yeah,
not a failure of film. It's just one of those where you could have told the same exact story the same exact way, lost nothing, but cut 30 minutes.
Yeah, again, I'd have to go through specifically to figure out where. I mean, this isn't, not to rehash the old gag, but when you said, okay, what are you going to cut out of Age of Extinction? Stop. I'm making a point. I said specifically, okay, you cut this 5 minutes, this 2 minutes, this 5 minutes, this
Yeah.
10 minutes. Well, like I knew what I thought needed to be cut from that film to make it a more to achieve the same goal. Here, I'm not disagreeing with you. I think it probably is overlong, but there's nothing quite as obviously removable off the top of my head, at least as I think back on it. So it would be a fun exercise to go through it and go, okay, we need to trim, somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes. Where do we cut? How do we cut? That kind of thing. I think it'd be an interesting exercise, but like I said, nothing obviously comes to mind when I think about that. You mentioned the set design, which is wonderful. I like the color palette that Del Toro uses here. Anytime they're in kind of the carnival sequences, things look dusty. Once they get to Chicago, things are a little bit brighter, a lot sharper.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really, really smart cinematography and framing in that respect. I like the
Blanchett's office has the feel and coloring of a very cold.
Yeah.
It almost feels like Superman's
Fortress of Solitude.
Yeah, it has that Fortress of Solitude feel without the silliness.
Yeah, it very much does. I like the costume design that went into this. They did excellent work.
Yeah.
Making people look like they're from the 40s is not the easiest thing, especially when you're going through the differences. We start out with, lower end guy Bradley Cooper in a carnival to high end Bradley Cooper in the High Life of Chicago to hobo.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other stuff in the background that's all this that has to mesh and has to blend, and they do an exceptional job with that.
So this thing is up for a bunch of awards and is probably going to get a bunch of Oscar nominations, which is another reason we're talking about it.
One would assume.
So Critics' Choice, it's nominated for Best Picture, Best Director for Guillermo del Toro, Best Cinematography, Best Costume Design, Best Production Design, Best Score, Best Hair and Makeup, which I completely agree with. I actually hope it wins.
Yeah.
I can't think of another one where it would.
I'd have to go. Effects. As far as hair and makeup goes, I'd have to be real. Like I'd have to go through some of the other nominees and like real fine tooth comb that. Not sure I agree on score, but I certainly liked the music. Not to set you up for that plug too early if you're not interested, but
if we're done, I can go with it. It's fine.
Well, not quite. So hang on, we'll get to the music again in just a second. We mentioned there's not a bad acting job to be found here. Cooper's excellent, Blanchett's excellent. Even the smaller stuff, Toni Collette does a good job. The guy who plays her husband, I think it was Tom, he does a really good job. Ron Perlman is Ron Perlman at this point. Like, this was one of the better jobs I've seen out of Rooney Mara in some time.
David Russell Strathairn. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, he's just a good working actor. He's been around for a while. He's done a lot. I mean, he was the primary antagonist in the third Jason Bourne movie. He was in Nomadland. In fact, he broke the poor lady's dishware. So he doesn't ever really do a bad job, but he's also not a name that you'd necessarily. He's a face you'd know, but he's not really a name that would stand out.
Nobody will know who he is until he shows up as a Marvel villain.
Even then. Look,
he'll probably be in some sort of kooky costume and caked on makeup and painted all the way gold. And
lest we have to rehash the discussion, 90% of Marvel villains suck. And after 40 films, I have done the math on that. So that's all good. I don't know that this will win Best Picture. I think that's a bit of a stretch this year, but we'll have to wait and see.
The front runner is Belfast.
Right now. That at the Golden Globes, they'll be in different categories, I think, because that's a musical, if memory serves.
Maybe.
Is it or is it not? I can't remember.
Oh, look, you keep talking.
You've reviewed it.
Belfast?
Yeah, didn't you?
No, not yet. Not. I mean, you may have thought I did because you time traveled, and past when we were doing that, but no, okay. I have not. It is labeled a comedy drama.
Okay, I don't know. There's a stage performance in it, so that might be what I'm mistaking it for. So either way. Belfast is kind of the clubhouse leader at the moment, and I think that'll probably hold. But this is certainly a worthy addition to Del Toro's excellent filmography. It's well worth your time if you're interested in the heavier material and the kind of morality play that goes into, which is mostly what I think of this film as, this story.
It was listed as the National Board Reviews. It was the winner of the National Board Reviews top 10. It joins its Luminary Pictures as Licorice Pizza, which we will eventually get to. Belfast, which we will eventually get to.
Licorice Pizza might be another one that goes all the way too.
Neck and neck. Don't Look Up, which we are reviewing in 2 weeks, I think.
I can't believe that's getting buzz like that. I really can't.
Dune, which we reviewed. King Richard, which we reviewed. The Last Duel, which we reviewed.
None of those have a chance.
The Red Rocket, which I would like to review, but I don't know anyone that wants to go see that besides me. The Tragedy.
You don't even really want to see it. You just like the idea of it.
You sure do. You know me so well. The Tragedy of Macbeth, which we're not reviewing. I don't want to.
Hey, guys! I hate to break this to you, but Macbeth dies.
And West Side Story.
Boy, look! In 3 more years,
you know what's not on that list? Spider-Man. Just saying.
For good reason, apparently. Hang on. In 3 years, the Tragedy of West Side Story by Steven Spielberg, the documentary about that film, is going to sweep some Oscars for documentaries. Like the sad story of that movie is more interesting than the sad story it tries to tell.
All right. Anything else about this movie? If not, we'll move on to the lack of money it made.
Well, again, it's up for best score, so we'll revisit the bit here. I did enjoy the music. Again, I'm not sure best score, but I haven't seen. I'll have to see the full list of nominees once award season really kicks off. But the music here is certainly very, very good. I especially love the music that goes on when Blanchett reveals that she's been manipulating Bradley Cooper the whole time into killing a man who wronged her, and he was just too stupid to see it.
Yeah, very haunting music in that
scene. Very. So I actually also love that there's essentially no music in the final scene. It's just those two guys talking. That makes it all the more harrowing. So yeah, the music in this is quite good. So I'm not objecting to its nominations.
And if you'd like to check out the music, if you're hearing this review and you're like, I'm going to wait for it to come on TV, like most of the known universe, but you're wanting to hear the scoring now, well, as it turns out, we are giving away a free 30-day trial of the Amazon Music Unlimited service at getamazonmusic.com/W2M network. So you click the link in the description of this podcast, then you go fill out the information, and then you can go and stream all the soundtracks and all whatever bands, whatever genres, whatever you like, including the soundtrack to Nightmare Alley for 30 days on us. And then at the end of that 30 days, you can cancel with no fuss, no muss, or you can keep it and pay the monthly fee, which is comparable to Apple Music and Spotify. But we use Amazon Music here all the time. We use it on the Metal Hammer of Doom. It's great. We love it. And with that said, let's go ahead and talk about how there's no money to be had.
We're in the money. We're in the money.
Yes, indeed. All right. So this thing has made I think we talked
at this point
before. It's a $60 million budget. It's made $2.8 million. This is a fairly substantial loss. We said this before. In a year where Disney has lost, not just on the Fox deal, I kind of focused on that.
Well, it's worth talking about as a general point that there's still stuff that they were obligated to continue. And the other thing about Nightmare Alley that might have actually swelled its budget. This thing had to shut down production more than once. I think the full making of this movie, and I don't just mean the process of writing it out. Was
principal photography began in January of 2020. Temporarily moved to Buffalo in February. And then principal photography was initially set to begin in September of 2019, but was delayed to accommodate Bradley Cooper.
Yeah, that's a funny bit of alternate casting. Originally for this lead role, they were looking at Leonardo DiCaprio was attached, and then they went with Cooper instead for reasons. And I would have been curious to see DiCaprio's take on this.
In March of 2020, Del Toro himself shut down production due to rising concerns about COVID-19. And then Disney Everybody went to lunch and came back 6 months later. Disney officially halted production on the film soon after. So yeah, there was a lot of start and stop with this. I don't know what possessed them to release this on the same day as Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no other way to interpret that as, they I don't know if wanted the things to fail is the right phrase I'm looking for, but I think they just highly expected it to fail no matter when they released it, given the state of the marketplace right now. This is yet another one of those movies meant for an older audience, and older audiences just aren't going to the theaters. Even taking COVID out of it, I think a lot of people are just it's so easy to watch the stuff at home on your big screen, flat screen television.
This has been a trend that I don't want to say it came out of nowhere. And we're going to talk about this more tomorrow, so I'm not going to go into detail on this. But the theatrical experience over the last 2 years, and it's been really fast that this happened, it's not really about movies anymore.
No.
It's about
events.
And not just events. It's events where a bunch of drunk people shout and scream at the movie theater.
Oh boy, are we going to talk about that tomorrow? I have things to say. Well, let me jump in here. So after Solo bombed, despite its pre-production issues and its change in directors and all of that, it also lost the audience. The very heavily motivated, almost religious Star Wars audience, and bombed spectacularly.
Disney Star Wars is a catastrophic failure and has essentially burned every bit of goodwill that one of the most devoted fan bases in existence has.
So the Red Letter Media guys have a character that they occasionally do. They haven't done a lot of this lately, but they will usually break out a character called Scientist Man. When the fabricated controversy about Ghostbusters 2016 was going on, they did a whole Scientist Man thing looking at the statistical analysis of how that was all BS. They did a Scientist Man Explains the Terminator timeline, which is hysterical, by the way.
I assume that's just Scientist Man getting drunker and drunker and then breaking down sobbing by the end of it.
It's close. It's really funny. It's like the Ghostbusters one is interesting because of the statistical analysis, and if you don't care about that sort of thing, then it's not worth watching. I've watched it dozens of times. I think it's fascinating. But the most recent one, and I shared this in our chat, and I said because this reminds me of Chris Bailey. They talked about how Star Wars on Lucasfilm as owned by Disney has been a catastrophic failure. Kind of coming to a head with Solo. And so skipping forward to the punchline of the whole video, he was like, I have a solution to fix Star Wars on film. And Scientist Man's solution is that they have to be closed off theatrical events that you have to pay, and you have to pay $100 to get in, which by the way, is a real thing that happened. When The Force Awakens came out, and I remember because I went, there was a theatrical experience that Disney was putting on where, now, granted, it wasn't just the movie. You got to see the movie in kind of like a semi-private screening earlier than everybody else, and then you got led into the park, and the park was doing Star Wars stuff. It was Hollywood Studios at the time.
Yeah.
So well worth the $100 ticket price. So so there's a seriousness and a believability to what he's saying, but it's also tongue-in-cheek because he's just saying, no, it's just $100 to watch the film. But the funny thing about that was how people will actually pay that money. Like we both know that if they had said, let's use Spider-Man as an example. We're going to make a Spider-Man movie. We're going to create a theatrical event about it. It's going to unite all of the Spider-Man on films. Like they just let you know that ahead of time. We're going to bring in Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, Tom Holland, and it's going to be all the villains from all the other villains. It's going to be big Spider-Man. It's going to be Avengers Endgame, but just the Spider-Man movies.
For the record, that's going to be every Marvel movie forever now is, hey, how much shit can we cram in here to try and sell this as, look, it's all coming together as they desperately try to figure out something approaching narrative cohesion for their catastrophic bowl of spaghetti.
Yeah, when the next Doctor Strange movie is half an X-Men movie. Anyway, the point that I was getting to was
X-Men, 1/3 Fantastic Four, and just for good measure, Benedict Cumberbatch, Doctor Strange winds up in the Sherlock universe to act opposite himself.
No, he has to, but then Robert Downey Jr. has to come back as his version of Sherlock.
Yes, the Sherlock verse. It's
Right.
gonna happen.
Anyway, to finish my sentence, if you had said we will give you the ultimate live action Spider-Verse movie, but it's $100 a ticket, I would guarantee you it does at least 8/10 of the audience it did with, just being a normal movie.
Yeah.
Like people would have been nutty people out there who love this sort of catnip for the masses would have absolutely paid that money.
Let's call them what they are.
Fans.
Sheep. and let me be clear, I'm not saying sheep like you people don't think. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying sheep because you're lining up to be fleeced.
Sure. So anyway, so relating this back to Nightmare Alley, we're just not in a place right now, COVID or no COVID, where there's a theatrical audience rather for a movie like Nightmare Alley. It just doesn't exist right now.
Look, let's put this in kind of harsh reality terms about how stupid our culture is at the moment. The Godfather, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Dog Day Afternoon, these films would have zero box office return if they were released now.
No, absolutely.
That's how stupid we've become.
That's the thing is, like, you wouldn't. I mean, do you even release The Godfather at this point in a theater? Maybe as a limited run, like they're doing with Being the Ricardos, but
it would have been.
But then it goes on Netflix.
Yeah, it would have been The Many Saints of Newark.
Yeah. So, all right. So just to get through this, we'll have a more in-depth money session tomorrow. But sticking with Nightmare Alley debuted at number 5 behind the following features. Okay, so this is its debut. It debuted on December 17th against Spider-Man, which I don't know if you know this or not. It won the weekend just by a small margin.
Yeah, close race there.
Yeah. Encanto.
Oh,
West Side
man.
Story.
Hang on. Look, we're going to talk more about this tomorrow, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
But that 65% fall for West Side Story is awful. They didn't have a lot to begin with.
One and done, baby. One and done. Talk about
you got to hold the top spot the same way that certain boxers get interim international titles. Like, yeah, that means nothing.
Yeah, and that's another Fox one that they inherited. And look, any other year that probably does, gangbusters. But
no. I'm going to disagree with you there.
I don't see why you and Pat have this hard-on for not doing another West Side Story.
Okay, you want the answer? I'm happy to answer the question. Okay. Let me be clear about what I'm about to say.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it bombs this hard.
Okay.
That is not my argument. My argument is that even in a perfectly normal theatrical situation, this does not do gangbusters.
Because?
One, there's no reason not to watch the original instead of this.
Okay.
None. And if you're going to do a remake or an update or something like that for that kind of story, you need a hook. Because otherwise, no one cares.
All right, let me ask you a question. It's a straight up 10 words or less. Yes or no.
Hang on. Here's the other thing. Mm-hmm. Live action musicals have been on the decline for a long time.
Well, certainly this year is an indicator of that. My question to you is thusly, and it kind of ends the argument so that we can move on. Steven Spielberg Presents. Nope. Does that have any inherent value anymore?
In an ideal, again, in a normal circumstance, is this going to bomb this hard? No, it's not going to bomb this hard. It's going to find some kind of audience, at least for opening weekend.
Mm-hmm.
It's opening when it opened, even under normal circumstances, it would have won the weekend anyway. There wasn't a whole lot else out there to kind of challenge it in that respect. No one's going to see Encanto for the third week. I mean, people did, obviously, but you know what I mean. That's not a hard sell if you're so inclined.
It maintained the number 2 spot twice in a row, and it's dropped 35% of its theaters.
It's not dropped all that much. It's had some pretty impressive holds week to week. So, look, Spielberg's theater cachet at this point
That's what I was asking about.
It's not what people think it is. He's
All right.
had too many. Look, what's the last thing he did apart from West Side Story? Do you know off the top of your head?
Spielberg. Not without looking it up, no.
I'll look it up because I'm curious now.
Well, while you do that, Ghostbusters fell from 3 to 4, and then Nightmare Alley debuted at number 5. You know, it's so funny, and I don't want to talk too much about it, but like Spider-Man, 260 million, Nightmare Alley, 2 million. It's just so ridiculous. But even like some of these other ones, like Encanto, 6 million for the weekend, West Side Story, 3 million for the weekend, Ghostbusters, 3 million, Nightmare Alley debuts with less than 3 million.
Okay, here's Steven Spielberg recently. Okay, I'm not even gonna 2015 Bridge of Spies, which was all right. Well, another movie kind of like West Side Story. It's not going to be a big smash hit, but you know, people will be interested. Follows that up with the BFG, and we've talked about that and how badly it bombed. Follows that up with The Post, which was a prestige attempt that didn't win any awards, or almost any. Followed that with Ready Player One in 2018.
Right. Okay.
So, look, Spielberg has created some of the best movies ever, and I very much enjoy when he is on his game. But let's not pretend that at this point in time he's got the same kind of pull as an attraction based on being the director that he did. What did he do 10 years ago? It's about to 2011. Even 2011, he had The Adventures of Tintin and Warhorse.
Okay.
You know,
it's a fair argument to say that like his name just doesn't carry.
No, it just doesn't at this point. And he's still like I said, he's still a good director. I'm still interested in some of the stuff that he does, but he's not gold or he's not magic by virtue of Spielberg anymore. That's just not the case.
All right. If you're interested in the worldwide, where it is right now, tune into our Spider-Man review tomorrow. We'll discuss it at length. In the meantime, let's go ahead and do the one thing we can talk about at this point: the critical review.
Are you ready? I said, are you ready?
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
The critical review is brought to you by Grammarly. Grammarly's AI products help people communicate more effectively. Grammarly helps you write mistake-free on Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and nearly anywhere else you write on the web. Grammarly corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, and spelling mistakes, while also catching contextual errors, improving your vocabulary, and suggesting style improvements. To download Grammarly today, go to getgrammarly.com/W2M Network. Again, it's getgrammarly.com/W2M Network to download Grammarly for free. Alrighty.
Nothing beats free.
All right. So the critics gave it an 80. They liked it slightly better than the audience, who didn't hate it, but they didn't love it.
I think the audience did a lot of what like you did, and my brother. I saw this with one of my brothers, and he had kind of the same reaction you did. I expected more, imagery-based horror and kind of things like that. So I think there was a bit of disconnect between what people expected and what they got, and I think they reacted poorly to that.
I think this. You know what I think failed this movie? I think the marketing failed it, because I think if you pitch it as a gritty noir and a psychological thriller, I think maybe you get some people that are into that sort of thing. If you put it out there as something of a horror movie and then you get this, I can see like there were people, they weren't that. I think it was a 9:50 showing on a Sunday night, so it was not exactly a full theater, but those people that were there, I think like left halfway through. Like I think I might have been the only one left in the theater by the time it was over. While it may not hit quite as hard as the original, Del Toro's Nightmare Alley is a modern noir thriller with a pleasantly pulpy spin.
I've I'm very curious why people thought the original movie hit harder than this one. The original has a much more uplifting ending, believe it or not. He becomes a carnival geek, but Molly, he winds up in the same carnival as Molly, and she kind of gives him hope for the future and talks him out of it. Like they really, and bear in mind, we're talking the 1940s in film. There were some written and unwritten rules about what you could do as far as that goes. So
David Sims of The Atlantic, top critic. Because Del Toro isn't working under the same 1940s cultural censorship, his adaptation is more lurid and violent than Edmund Golding's earlier version, and it delves into the darkness of Gresham's novel. Why is the movie such a slog, then?
You, sir, have no patience. Look, and to be clear, we both said this is a bit overlong, but I think calling it a slog might be a bit unfair to it. There's a difference between acknowledging a movie is overlong and saying a movie is uninteresting or boring, and that's kind of what slog implies. This was not so much a slog, it was just, like I said, there's periods where you wonder, maybe we should trade and shave here or there, but I did not consider this a slog of a film.
Sarah Moss of Laney Gossip. Nightmare Alley is an unusually bleak tale from Guillermo del Toro.
Lady, you are not that familiar with Del Toro's work, then. That's all I'm gonna this is bleaker than most Del Toro movies. I'll give you that.
I think she would have been happy watching Hellboy 3.
But there's a very real argument that the ending of Pan's Labyrinth is bleaker than this. Just throwing it out there.
I would say so. Bill Waters of Nerd.
That's because, look, hang on. You might yell at me about being, a cynical robot.
Mm-hmm.
You're the one without magic in your soul if you don't see the uplifting argument about the ending of Pan's Labyrinth. I'm just saying it.
Beautifully shot and some good performances, but it's a paint-by-numbers affair with little suspense or surprise, all the while aspiring to be a classic noir outing.
I don't think he's wrong in the sense that I disagree with the overall rating, but his logic in getting there at least makes sense.
Alan Zilberman of Washington City Paper. Guillermo del Toro's latest goes for vicious, but struggles from too much ambition and not enough trust.
That is a needlessly, not even pedantic. That's. What do you mean not enough?
Ass.
What do you mean not enough trust? Like, your review should not be that pretentious.
Robert Dennerstein of Dennerstein Unleashed. Ooh, he's unleashed.
He used to work for Collider or something, I guess.
Nightmare Alley limps its way through a story that needed to move more quickly, vanquishing the opportunity for second thoughts or over-evaluation.
Part of the reason it's slow is that so you can marinate on those particular questions, buddy. Again, I don't think he's wrong when he says it needed to move quicker. I think he's wrong about why that negatively affected the viewing experience here.
Michael Compton of Bowling Green Daily News, that vaunted periodical. The cast can't save a film that promises something more in the first half, only to build to a rather weak payoff. The result is a film that has all the ingredients in place to deliver, but never finds the right combination to make it all work.
This is not a person who's capable of understanding subtext.
Clearly not. Excuse me. Afro Circus. Let's see here. Allison Wilmore of New York Magazine, Vulture, top critic.
New York Magazine.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't soft pedal its material so much as it suffocates it with meticulousness of its choices, with every aspect of its squalor noticeably art directed.
Why do you think that's a bad thing? Why do you think attention to detail and, again, deliberate production design like that is such a negative thing? You weird person.
Kent Turner of filmforward.com. Del Toro's film becomes bloated early on with way too much exposition. Haven't we learned anything from Peter Jackson's 3-hour-plus King Kong? Exposition? What exposition?
Bradley Cooper doesn't even speak for the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
There's talking with a carny magician and mentalist about his system and his tricks is not exposition. That's key to the character trying to strike out on his own. Like, it's not there just to be there.
Peter Travers of ABC News, top critic. The carny scenes of freaks and geeks are undeniably creepy, but Guillermo del Toro's hallucinatory brilliance only comes in flashes as Bradley Cooper and a dynamite cast struggled to build a mesmerizing misfire into a classic it might have been.
I don't agree with that.
I just want to read this because, like, this is the equivalent of Tina Fey doing an impression of Sarah Palin yelling and I can see Russia from my house. Sonny Bunch of The Bulwark, Del Toro's best movie since Pan's Labyrinth.
Okay. No. But okay. Why was that in... Hold on. Go back up to that for just a second.
Yes, sir.
Why is that in quotes? Who are you quoting, you palmetic, pedantic jerk? Like, why is that in quotes?
It's a good question. Robert's grandfather weighing in from the Wall Street Journal, old man Joe Morgenstern, top critic. Nightmare Alley in its entirety, a beautifully visualized period piece that holds our attention and evokes plenty of horror, to be sure, but never brings us under the tent of wholehearted involvement. This time, the beauty is screen deep. By the way, that's something I wanted to mention before. The audience, if you were somebody who really liked Carnival on HBO, you'll probably like this movie.
Okay, old man Morgenstern, I get that you were upset that you weren't a consultant on this film since you were a hale and hearty man in your 30s during the 1940s.
Alex Bentley of Culture Map. Nightmare Alley is a noir that wants to pretend it's way more intriguing than it actually is. Guillermo del Toro has never shied away from making his films dark, but this time he forgot to make the story interesting. Yeah, this is why Spider-Man's getting almost a near perfect rating on this. Like, not a lot of patience in the professional film criticism genre.
Yeah,
not genre, for anything that isn't like catnip.
I will say this as far as that particular bit of criticism goes. I think he's onto something that in the writing process and a bit of the direction, I think they overestimated people being interested in elements of the plot, or they expected the sort of more character study aspects to carry through a weaker plot, and they kind of failed to walk that line appropriately. I think that's a fair point. But, buddy, if you're like, I'm probably not going to say anything good about Spider-Man. I'm just going to say it. Like, I haven't seen the movie, so I might feel differently after seeing it, but you bunch of idiots with no patience and no understanding and no willingness to engage with a film.
Yeah.
But hey, look, things from 20 years ago that I can cheer about. Hooray! Old man Maguire's here.
I'm not going to criticize Spider-Man too much. We'll talk about it tomorrow, and I have a lot of positive things to say about it. It definitely hit me emotionally in a couple of different places. That said, it is not a triumph of film. It's
not a triumph of anything other than expanding the vault that Scrooge McDuck swims.
You know what's a triumph in? It's a triumph in studios trying to figure out the mathematical equation for a hit.
It is a triumph of forestalling the inevitable collapse of your creatively bankrupt enterprise.
All right, last one. Dom Sinicola, Pace Magazine. The whole film begins to resemble a fetish object more than an adaptation in a bad way.
I'm going to hope you're using fetish in the non-sexual sense.
Oh, he has to be. Come on, let's be somewhat fair to that guy.
No, I'm not going to be fair to him. I'm not going to give him the benefit of that doubt. I'm going to say I hope.
I think he's saying in a more critical, more mean-spirited way what I was saying about sort of the long lingering shots that could have been cut.
I think, and again, I don't necessarily disagree with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the assertion that Del Toro is more in love with this movie than I'm not. I think that's an overreach, but I might be wrong.
There's a conversation to be had about you as a studio. Yes, you have to make your catnip movies. You have to make your products. Your Ghostbusters, your Marvels, your DCs. You have to sell tickets. You have contracts to fulfill. You have to make money. I'm not really arguing against any of that. Yeah. But okay, so So that's your first meeting of the day. What products are we going to put on the shelf? This comic book, this thing from the 80s that, you know, that 40-year-old.
No. It's not even, at this point, it's not even this comic book.
Mhm.
It's this thing from the 80s, this thing from the 90s, this thing from the early 2000s, because that's 20 years old now.
Yeah. Well, the point that I was getting to was
what can we rehash without actually expending creative effort or taking that big of a gamble?
So you've had that meeting now. That meeting lasted 20 minutes because that's all the meeting you need. What things do we own IPs of that we can make products into, and and how much money?
I know. Let's do a Brady Bunch reboot.
Your second meeting of the day is longer and takes more time to figure out what it is you're going to do. Because when an artist walks into your office and says, I want to, I am this famous artist and I have had successes in the past doing both products and art. I want to make this thing. And you as a studio, once you've nailed down what your tent pole money makers are going to be, I think you then have to start to consider, well, what art pieces do we want to put out? What artists do we want to feature? And, Guillermo del Toro is not an unsafe bet. I think nothing worked out the way that it should have with this movie.
Yeah,
but
this movie
if your elevator pitch to me is we're going to bring Guillermo del Toro to adapt this noir novel
about the downfall of man to his own excesses.
Yeah, I don't know if I say no to that.
I wouldn't, but I'm also me.
Ronnie Adams wants to know if you're feeling the Christmas spirit.
The Christmas spirit? Absolutely. What does that have to do with?
We were mean to a film, therefore we are Grinches. You're a mean one.
Just wait. You wait for tomorrow.
You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch. You really hated Spider-Man. You piss on all the Marvel films. You hate all of DC, Mr. Grinch.
Okay, I don't piss on all the Marvel films.
I'm including myself in that. I mean, he's picking at you, and I'm, I've had I took my shots tonight from way up in the bird's nest.
Yeah, and look, in all seriousness, wait for tomorrow. We will talk about Spider-Man at length.
I will say nice things, and I will say a couple of negative things. Come at me, Chris Bailey.
I'm gonna do the inverse. I'm gonna say mostly negative things, but I'm sure I'll have one or two nice things to say. That's. Look, if you think I'm operating in bad faith, that's a different discussion. I can't
wait for you to talk about the special effects in this thing, like some of the CGI.
Why?
You'll know when you see it.
Please don't. No. Why? Why would Mark? No. Why do you do that to me?
Because I want you. You don't have a cell phone, but I want you in the middle of the movie to have a pigeon. And
you want a homing pigeon?
Yeah, and it's just like when you see it, and you're like, oh, and then you start furiously writing, and you give the message to the pigeon, and then you say, "Find Radulich," to let me know. Oh, that's what you were talking about. Okay.
I will probably want to confer with you after seeing the film. This has happened on occasion when you've said, "Boy, that was bad."
Mm-hmm.
And I almost never disagree with you when you say you've seen bad CGI, because if it's bad enough to catch your eye, it's really bad. But there's a non-trivial number of times when we get on and I say, yeah, that sucked. But you want to know what really sucked? This scene from like 2 minutes before that.
Yeah. There is a couple of times Spider-Man goes nearly full Roger Rabbit. It's really, I mean, I'm sure most people didn't care or even notice, but I have to talk about these things with a critical point of view, and especially having seen it twice now, I was like, oh, wait a minute, whoops. that might have needed a few more renderings.
I need to ask you this since you've seen it twice.
Yeah.
One, I assume your second viewing was better because there were less drunk frat boys around you.
Yeah, I could actually hear what one of the one of the characters had to say.
You and I had that
the entire audience cheering over it, making the scene utterly pointless.
You and I had that conversation, so I know who it is. So we don't have to potentially spoil it. I'll spoil it tomorrow, though.
Oh, there'll be so many spoils.
I am gonna tell you everything in gritty, lurid detail, right down to how the Punisher shoots Spider-Man in the head at the end of it.
I'm going to read from the script in my sexy voice so that it comes across like a smutty novel.
Mark, you and I came up with the perfect ending to this particular movie, and I'm sad they didn't steal it from us.
Well.
Not a joke, people. Like 3 weeks ago, Mark and I were just like, you know how we should end this movie? I would have James Bernthal's Punisher snipe Spider-Man from like a mile away.
Mm.
And I would end on the cliffhanger of is Peter Parker dead?
Yeah. All right. For those of you
then because I'm me, I would have him be dead.
Well, you came here to hear us talk about Nightmare Alley, not Spider-Man, and so that is our review of Nightmare Alley, not Spider-Man.
Yeah, last thoughts. It's a really good movie. You have to be in the right mood and frame of mind to enjoy it.
Yeah, and a month from now when it's on PVOD, you should absolutely rent it.
And depending on where it lands on streaming, yeah, this is absolutely worth your time.
All
Mark,
right.
Here's the last thing I want to say before we get into Spider-Man tomorrow.
Yeah.
I watched this movie. Then I came home and I watched season 2 of The Witcher.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had a nice couple of days when I could enjoy entertainment media that was not made for children.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have to see Spider-Man.
And now you have to see Spider-Man, which is so made for children. I saw it with children today.
Okay, hold on. First of all, every Marvel movie is made for children. Everybody out there needs to accept that fact. That's not me insulting you for liking them. Let me be clear.
Well,
I enjoy some Marvel movies. That doesn't mean they're not aimed at children first and foremost.
So I saw it with children. I saw it with an almost 8-year-old, and almost an 11-year-old, and I think another 8-year-old. And the 7 and the 8 the 7 and the 8-year-old's reaction was Lollapalooza. They just thought this was amazing.
Sorry, this was the question I meant to ask earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Having seen it twice,
yeah,
I assume your second viewing, while more pleasant in an overall experience, the film itself doesn't hold up, would be my guess. Like I'll
talk more about this tomorrow, but to simply answer your question. We can save
that for tomorrow.
To very simply answer your question, not that it didn't hold up, I didn't know how I was going to feel about it when I saw it the first time. And when it was over and none of the things I was afraid of happened, I was relieved. Knowing that going in.
They didn't pull down their pants and defecate on my face.
Yeah, they didn't steal the movie outright from Tom Holland. They didn't waste the other actors in the movie.
Shock of shocks. There's a lot of guest appearances by actors and characters in this hodgepodge mishmash potato soup.
So, long story short, they didn't steal the movie away from its lead. They didn't give the movie away to its guests. They found, in one of the rare instances where Marvel hits the perfect pitch, I applaud them for restraint, which is seldom in a Marvel movie.
Very.
Upon second viewing, not having that kind of tension and anxiety about it, I was more like, get to the third act already.
Like we were through the entire first 2/3 of Far From Home.
Well, when you don't know, what's going to happen, you're like, anybody could show up at any time, and in some cases did. And then, that I don't want to talk about this right this second, but I'll say this, and then I'm shutting up and we're going into plugs. And it kind of goes to your comment about people cheering at the screen. When your whole marketing campaign is that, what's his face who plays Dr. Octopus? What's his real name? Alfred Molina. Yeah. When Alfred Molina is all over your marketing. When, to a lesser extent, Willem Dafoe is all over your marketing.
We see Jamie Foxx. We get informations about...
Why are people cheering when they showed up on screen like it's a big shock?
Oh, I hate that. Let me just do this
real fast. The big action sequence on the screen, the big action sequence in the commercial is Dr. Octopus showing up and fighting Spider-Man on the bridge. And in the same bloody scene, Willem Dafoe shows up as the Green Goblin. And people in the theater who, I don't know, were having, spontaneous amnesia were surprised when they both showed up, it seemed like.
Yeah.
I'm like, my God, the Rolling Stones are playing Jumping Jack Flash. I would have never have thought that.
But bam, second encore when Hank Williams sings Moon River.
Look, there are some legitimately surprising cameos and appearances in Spider-Man that I don't like standing up and cheering at movies. It's not a live performance. But I will at least accept that as sort of a cultural phenomenon. People are happy to see these people on screen and have no ability to compose themselves. Fine, I got it.
Y'all need to be hitting the head with a board.
When you saw it, when you see it in the trailer 800 times and you're still doing that.
You people, and I'm going to direct this at a specific
This from
Go
the
on
guy who
Twitter
frequently says, "Get it off my lawn."
Go on Twitter and show your appreciation. Tag everyone. I'm sure they're happy about all those notifications. Don't ruin the viewing experience of everyone else around you.
Yeah. All
Look,
right.
and hang on. Here's my gripe with people like this.
Yeah.
Like that. I don't. If something is genuinely surprising,
Mhm.
okay. I don't begrudge people reacting to performance art, which is ostensibly what this is.
Sure.
If you're the type of idiot, and look at me. Yeah, I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying.
Ronnie Adams with a hot take. Twitter is a vile dumpster fire.
Yeah, no, boy, a lot of pushback coming your way on that. But that's where that belongs. Okay, not in my theater. Right? Okay, you listen. Look at me. Look at me. If you're the type of idiot, this is important, that watches a movie trailer 800 times to help climb the view count so you can keep fangasming over it, you don't get to do that in the movie. You've seen it. You know it's there. Stop it.
I would like to say at this time that the Batman trailer is dope as fuck. Let's move on. I'm taking a shot at somebody. Leave me alone.
Okay. I thought you were being serious about the Batman trailer, which
God, no.
I did. Look, I'm going to say this about the Batman trailer. I finally saw it.
Mm-hmm.
There's one part that I think is unbearably stupid.
Mm-hmm.
That's Batman walking full force into full frontal machine gun fire. That's unbearably stupid. The rest of it, I'll wait and see. Like, there was nothing else in there that actively turned me off.
Robert Pattinson gave my wife the vapors, and she's thinking about seeing it with me.
I'm sure he did. Your wife, who, God love her, insisted on doing the Long Road to Ruin on the Twilight franchise.
Sure did, Ollie. All right, tomorrow we begin our long march to Christmas. We're doing some re-airs. Our Harley Quinn holiday special, Tarja from Spirits and Ghosts. These are all Christmas things. Our Warrior Christmas special, which is now infamous, by the way.
Where you guys delve into deep anatomical detail.
Yeah. That's me and Chris Sheehan having a lot of fun with that book. The Grinch 2018 review that we did.
That is certainly a piece of something allegedly art.
Myself and Sean Comer reviewing Jingle All the Way, and then myself and Jason Teasley reviewing Santa Jaws. Some new Christmas stuff we've got coming up. Myself and Evan Bevins will be doing a couple of off the beaten path Christmas movies. We're going to do Fat Man, The Ref with Dennis Leary, and a movie I saw only for the first time today, In Bruges, which was interesting.
That's a pretty darn good movie, actually. That's one of the movies that shows you Colin Farrell can act.
Yeah, for sure. Myself and Jesse Starcher reviewed Brian Posehn's The Last Christmas comic, which is a lot of fun. Christmas Eve, we'll be airing our Christmas trivia show with Jason Teasley, his lovely wife, David Wright, and myself, hosted by Jesse and Alexis. And right now, my kids are saying, and I don't want to make too many promises here, but my kids are saying we're going to do a triple feature on Mickey's Christmas Carol, Yogi's First Christmas, and Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas.
And your children discussing that series of Christmas specials. If that's not just warming the cockles of your cold, dead heart, nothing will.
Thank you. Who says we're not on the Christmas spirit? Speaking of which,
you thought I was going to say something negative about any of that? Like, you want to
yes,
talk?
Yes, I've seen your social media interactions with me. So
look, I might take issue with some of those movies, with some of those specials individually, but I'm not going to knock you and your kids doing a review of them. Like, go have wholesome family fun.
We will. We're going to
broadcast it for monetary purposes.
Yes. Glorious clickbait. We're going to re-air our Heavy Saurus Raiha.
Children watch Mickey's Christmas Carol. You won't believe their reaction.
Heavy Saurus, Raiha Jula. It's guys from in a heavy metal band dressed up as dinosaurs playing Christmas music. It's fantastic. And then
sure sounds awesome.
And then on the 26th, we'll be re-airing our review from a few years ago of The Hateful Eight. And in theory, that evening, we will be reviewing Ghost in the Shell, Aeon Flux, and Ex Machina. That'll be Jeff Sloboda of the Batman Trailers Dope as Fuck podcast. I'm sorry, of the MCU's Bleeding Edge. and David Wright. And then, yes, finally, Chris Bailey. We are, in fact, reviewing Spider-Man No Way Home. We will have Gavin Napier, who will be joining us to review Spider-Man No Way Home. He is notoriously cranky he's a lot like Pat in that respect.
If you think I'm harsh,
he's the one that he had to record his own reaction to our review of Man of Steel. He hated it so much. He's another one who thought Days of Future Past was terrible because it wasn't comic book accurate. So I'm curious to see what he thought of Spider-Man, all the spider things. All right, that's it. That's all for me.
If
the spider things.
Please don't. One, Blink-182, as soon as they achieved any degree of mainstream notoriety, became absolute trash, and they weren't that good beforehand. Second, not throwing in. I'm not even talking about like Peter Porker, Spider-Ham. But if Spider-Pig from the Simpsons movie doesn't make an appearance in Spider-Man All the Spider Things, I'm going to be disappointed.
It can get weirder. Go do your plugs so we can get out of here, please.
All right. If you're interested in my take on combat sports, I host the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast, your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts and other combat sports related things. This week, I reviewed the final UFC card of the year, where Derek Lewis took his used athletic cup out of his shorts and threw it at a fan in the UFC Apex.
Did he say his balls was hot?
No, he was asked why he did that, and he said, I want to make an NFT out of that. I don't think he knows what those are.
Yeah.
Then he said, yeah, I hate 5-round fights, so UFC give me a 3-round title fight, please.
He's my favorite fighter ever.
He's a funny guy. I will never pretend. I understand the appeal of Derek Lewis, even if I don't like his fights. I understand why people do. So my full review of that event, which had positives, negatives, a really nice submission, actually. There was an inverted triangle choke in the first round, the first fight. So give that you can find my full review of that. I also talked a little bit about boxing, Art or Better Beef, which I covered with Mark. And because I had to laugh. I absolutely had to laugh about Jake Paul flatlining Tyron Woodley.
Have you seen, and I don't want to get into a discussion about this, but just yes or no, have you seen the stuff online about how he threw that fight?
Yes.
Okay.
MMA fans are unbelievably stupid people. I look, guys, I can't say it any other way. If you think that fight was fixed, you're an idiot. I don't have another way to say that at all. I wish I did. I wish I could give you the benefit of being someone who was hit in the head too often, or any other number of reasons that you're this divorced from reality. But I can't, because there isn't. You're just a horribly, horribly deluded, unbearably stupid person. And you're probably the kind of person who 3 years ago was saying, get rid of Tyron Woodley, he sucks. Now you're saying he's a good fighter. He could have knocked out Jake Paul. Why'd he throw that and take terrible, terrible, terrible head trauma and professional death to get knocked out like that? You're an idiot. You're a hypocrite. And just shame on you for being that brain dead.
We were done with this review 20 minutes ago. I just want to go on record as saying that.
You brought up those idiots. I didn't even address them. I just talked about the fight.
Okay.
So my review of that particular bit of hilarity, because that fight was awful. Like, that fight sucked out loud until the knockout. And you covered that with poor Dan Lasby.
We had fun and people enjoyed listening to us.
I'm sure you did. You were probably drinking, as most people would have been after 2 rounds of that fight.
No, I was really tired. If I had been drinking, I'd have passed out during the fight.
I'm pretty sure Tyron Woodley took a shot of something between rounds at some point. I'm gonna clinch more. That'll work. Yeah. So I reviewed that fight as well, because talking about Jake Paul generates traffic. And well, he does, man. I am not happy about the fact that he does, but I am not going to pretend that I am not at least somewhat subject to market forces. I can put Jake Paul knocks out Tyron Woodley in the title of my podcast, or I cannot, and you can see the numerical discrepancy in what happens.
And you die a little inside.
A little bit. So yeah, you can listen to that. I have a full report for the last UFC event up in 411mania.com. I cover professional wrestling a few days a week when it's on. My written report for AEW's Dark Elevation is already up. I did that before we started the show. So if you're interested in that, give that a read. That's in the MMA zone of 411 Mania. I cover MLW stuff when they release it. I think we're on a bit of a hiatus for them until January of next year. So we'll see if anything crazy happens between now and then. If they release something, I will review it. And I cover WWE SmackDown on Fridays. Last week was a flaming dumpster fire, saved by one main event talking segment, which was legitimately great. The rest of that show, they gave Madcap Moss and Baron Corbin messing around with a sword stuck in a desk a full segment. I'm not kidding. I wish I was. I wish a billion-dollar company with a talented roster could allocate their airtime better on an incredibly expensive deal for the Fox network than to have those two useless bags of crap parade around on my screen with Madcap telling jokes that would not be accepted to be inside of a Laffy Taffy wrapper. I wanted to die a little bit. That show was... Thank God for Roman Reigns, man. Just...
Okay.
He makes SmackDown watchable. And when he's not there, it's... Well, okay, look, Brock in overalls, right? Brock Lesnar in overalls is kind of fun.
Okay.
All right, so you can listen to that. I will be reviewing SmackDown on Friday. So yeah, Christmas Eve. Nowhere I'd rather be than watching that grease fire. So
hey,
I will do that.
If everyone goes to bed early and nobody wants to play with me, I'm going to play with Robert. There's a Fox fight on there's a PBC fight on Fox Christmas Day that I'm going to drag Robert into if I have nothing better to do.
No, look. Not only do you not have to have nothing better to do, I have to have nothing better to do.
Oh, let's not.
There's a non-trivial chance I'll just be down at my grandmother's.
She has Fox.
Yeah, but I don't have a phone.
Oh, God damn it. Okay. All right, folks. That's our review. That's all
You're
of our
not watching boxing at my grandmother's on Christmas Day. She's over 80. This might be our last one with her. I'm not taking time away from that.
Put her on the podcast.
You don't want to talk to my grandmother about boxing.
Okay. For Robert Winfree, I'm Mark Radulich. Thanks for joining us on Damn You Hollywood. We come back tomorrow where we have so much more to discuss. For Ronnie Adams hanging out with us on Twitch.
Thanks,
we
Ronnie.
love you, Ronnie. Thank you, Ronnie. And hey, if you're listening to this after, you're like, hello, why were they talking to a voice that we couldn't hear? Because we interact with the people who follow us on the live stream. So whether it's Twitch, YouTube, or Facebook, if you leave comments, we will put them on screen and we will talk to you. You can be a part of the show.
So if you wish to ask us bizarre questions or yell at us, just anything other than a long string of profanity, we will happily put your comment up and
depending on how funny the long string of profanity is.
Okay, yeah, Mark has jurisdiction over that. I would not put up a long string of profanity. He might.
All right. Thank you for joining us. Be well, be safe, and behave.